David Thompson was ashamed of his son. Standing backstage at Madison Square Garden, watching Marcus struggle for 37 seconds to say hello to Michael Jackson, David felt that familiar burning shame. Why had they come here? Why had his wife Sarah insisted on this Make-A-Wish visit? So their 10-year-old son could embarrass himself in front of the king of pop? But then Michael Jackson did something that terrified David even more. He smiled at Marcus and said, "How would you like to come on stage with me tonight?" In front of 20,000 people? David's heart stopped. No, absolutely not. His son couldn't speak without severe stuttering, couldn't say his own name without struggling, and Michael wanted to put him on stage in front of 20,000 people? This wasn't kindness. This was cruelty. This was setting Marcus up for the most public humiliation of his life. David opened his mouth to refuse, to protect his son from this disaster, but before he could speak, he saw something in Marcus's eyes he hadn't seen in for years. Hope. And he realized with crushing guilt that he'd been so focused on protecting Marcus from embarrassment that he'd forgotten to let him have hope. So David closed his mouth, swallowed his fear, and watched his son walk onto the Madison Square Garden stage, into the spotlight, in front of 20,000 people. What happened next would become one of the most remarkable moments in concert history. But what nobody in that arena knew, not David, not Sarah, not even Marcus himself, was that Michael Jackson had seen something in those 37 stuttering seconds that would change everything. September 22, 1987. Madison Square Garden, New York City. The Bad World Tour was in full swing, and Michael Jackson was at the absolute peak of his powers. Every show sold out within hours. Every performance was perfection. Tonight was no different. 20,000 fans packed into every seat, screaming before Michael had even taken the stage. Backstage, in the VIP area reserved for special guests and Make-A-Wish families, Marcus Thompson sat with his parents, trying not to throw up from nervousness. His hands were shaking so badly he had to sit on them. His palms were sweating through his jeans. His heart was racing so fast he could hear it pounding in his ears like drums. In 30 minutes, he was going to meet Michael Jackson, his hero, the man whose music had been the soundtrack to his entire life since he was 6 years old, the person he dreamed about meeting every single night for 4 years. But Marcus knew exactly how this meeting would go, because every meeting went the same way. He would try to speak. He would stutter, badly, painfully. People would look uncomfortable. They'd try to hide their pity behind forced smiles. And Marcus would feel that familiar burning shame that had become as much a part of him as his own heartbeat. What Marcus didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that his stutter was about to become the key to something revolutionary. But first, it would have to break him completely in front of 20,000 witnesses. Marcus Thompson had been stuttering since he was 6 years old. Not since birth. The stutter had appeared suddenly, traumatically, on a rainy October afternoon when a semi-truck ran a red light and T-boned his grandmother's car. Grandma Martha died on impact. Marcus, strapped in the back seat, survived with a severe concussion and 3 months of recovery. When he finally came home from the hospital, he couldn't speak anymore, not without fighting for every syllable. The doctors said the trauma had affected his speech centers, said it might improve with therapy, said there was hope. 4 years later, the stutter was worse than ever. At Riverside Elementary School, Marcus was known as Broken Record Marcus. The nickname had started with Jake Anderson, the class bully, and spread like disease, because Marcus repeated the first syllable of words over and over, like a record skipping on a broken turntable. "My name is Marcus. Can I go to the bathroom? Have you seen my backpack?" Every question was a battle. Every answer felt like a war he usually lost. And the worst part, Marcus couldn't defend himself when things went wrong. Couldn't tell his side of any story, because by the time he managed to stammer out an explanation, the other person had already told their version, and everyone believed them instead. Like the time Jake Anderson stole Marcus's lunch money, $5 his mother had carefully counted out that morning. Marcus tried to tell Mrs. Henderson what happened. Spent almost 2 minutes struggling to say, "Jake took my money." By that time, Jake had already told the teacher that Marcus lost his money and was trying to blame Jake. Mrs. Henderson believed Jake, because surely if Marcus was telling the truth, he'd be able to say it clearly, right? That was Marcus's life at 10 years old. Unable to defend himself. Unable to participate in class discussions. Unable to make friends because normal conversation took so much effort that other kids gave up trying to talk to him. But here's what nobody knew about Marcus Thompson. What nobody had discovered yet because they were too busy pitying the boy who couldn't speak. When Marcus was alone in his bedroom, when he thought nobody was listening, he sang along to Michael Jackson songs. And when he sang, he didn't stutter at all. His voice was clear, strong, perfectly rhythmic. No hesitation, no repetition, no struggle, just pure, Clean singing that would have shocked every speech therapist who'd ever told his parents there was no cure. Marcus didn't know this was significant, didn't understand what it meant. He just knew that singing made him feel free, made him feel like a normal kid. For 3 minutes and 27 seconds while Billie Jean played on his cassette player, and in exactly 47 minutes, Michael Jackson was going to discover the secret that Marcus had been keeping even from himself. But first, Marcus had to survive the most humiliating moment of his entire life. The Thompson family, a young woman with a clipboard and a headset appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Jackson is ready to meet you now." Marcus stood up so fast, he almost knocked over his chair. Sarah squeezed his shoulder. David forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. They followed the woman down a hallway lined with equipment cases and busy crew members, through a maze that seemed designed to build anticipation, to a private dressing room where Michael Jackson was waiting. And there he was, the king of pop, wearing his iconic black jacket with silver military details, black pants, white socks visible above black loafers. That famous face Marcus had seen on MTV and posters and album covers 1,000 times. But real, in person, 3 feet away, breathing the same air. Michael smiled, that warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes and made you feel like the most important person in the world. "Hello, you must be Marcus. I'm Michael. It's so nice to meet you." This was it, the moment Marcus had dreamed about for 4 years. Meeting his hero. All he had to do was say hello. One simple word, 5 letters. Should take 1 second. It took 37 seconds. Marcus's face contorted with effort. His neck muscles strained. His jaw clenched so tight it hurt. His breath caught in his throat like something physical was blocking it. "Hello, mister." He couldn't get the name out, couldn't force the syllables past whatever barrier had formed in his brain. His face was burning with shame so intense, he thought he might pass out. His eyes were starting to fill with tears that he desperately tried to blink back. David looked away, actually turned his head and stared at the wall because he couldn't watch this. Couldn't bear to see his son struggling like this in front of Michael Jackson. Couldn't stand the pity he knew would be in Michael's eyes. Sarah's hand tightened on Marcus's shoulder, encouraging, supporting, but also hurting because she was gripping so hard. 37 seconds. That's how long it took Marcus to finally choke out J.J. Jackson. The word came out like he'd been drowning and finally broke the surface for air. But when David finally forced himself to look at Michael's face, expecting pity or discomfort, or that awful fake cheerfulness people used around Marcus, he didn't see any of that. He saw something else entirely. Curiosity. Intense focus. Like Michael was watching something fascinating rather than something awkward. Like he was solving a puzzle in his head. "It's okay," Michael said gently, kneeling down to Marcus's eye level. "Take your time. There's no rush here. No pressure." But what David didn't know, what nobody in that room knew yet, was that in those 37 seconds, Michael Jackson's brilliant musical mind had noticed something. Something that 4 years of speech therapists had somehow missed. Something that was about to change Marcus's life and revolutionize how the world understood stuttering. But Michael needed to test his theory first. And the test he had in mind was either going to be the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever experienced, or the most devastating. Michael looked at Marcus with those famous eyes that had captivated millions. "Marcus, can I ask you something? Do you like music?" Marcus nodded eagerly. Of course, he liked music. He loved music, especially Michael's music. "When you listen to music, do you ever sing along?" Another nod. Marcus sang along to Michael's songs all the time. In his bedroom with the door locked. In the shower where nobody could hear. Anywhere, he was completely alone and safe from judgment. "Does it make you feel good when you sing?" A third nod. Singing was the only time Marcus felt free. The only time words didn't feel like enemies he had to fight. Michael's eyes lit up with that spark of creative genius that his collaborators recognized. That look that meant he was about to do something completely unexpected. Something that would either be brilliant or crazy, or usually both. "Marcus, I have an idea. A crazy idea that might seem scary, but I think it might also be amazing. Are you willing to try something with me?" Marcus nodded, even though his heart was pounding with fear. Because this was Michael Jackson, and if Michael Jackson asked you to try something, you said yes. "How would you like to come on stage with me tonight? In front of 20,000 people?" The room fell into shocked silence. So complete you could hear the distant sound of the crowd outside chanting Michael's name. Sarah gasped audibly. David's heart stopped beating for what felt like a full minute. And Marcus's eyes went wide with a mixture of terror and desperate, impossible hope. "Michael," David said quickly, his voice tight with panic and anger he was trying to control. "I don't think that's a good idea. Marcus has severe stuttering. He can't speak in front of crowds. He can barely speak in front of one person. Putting him on stage in front of 20,000 people would be exactly what he needs." Michael interrupted gently but with absolute certainty. "David, I know this seems scary. I know it seems like I'm setting Marcus up for the worst embarrassment of his life. But I promise you, I absolutely promise you I would never, ever do anything to hurt this child. I have an idea, a theory, and if I'm right, what happens on that stage tonight will change Marcus's life forever. And if you're wrong? David asked, and now, the anger was breaking through. If you're wrong, my son gets humiliated in front of 20,000 people and millions more when the footage gets broadcast on TV. If you're wrong, you destroy what little confidence he has left. You break him completely. Then I will personally apologize to Marcus and to both of you, Will said, his voice still gentle, but now with steel underneath. I will make it right. I will do whatever it takes. But David, Sarah, I need you to trust me. Just for tonight. Just for one performance. I have seen something in Marcus that I don't think anyone else has seen. And I need to prove it. Not to you. Not to the crowd. To Marcus himself. David looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at Marcus. And Marcus, despite the terror clearly visible on his pale face, despite his hands shaking and his breathing coming to fast, nodded. Yes. He wanted to do this. Wanted to take this terrifying leap of faith with his hero. Wanted to believe that Michael Jackson saw something in him besides broken stuttering mess. Okay, David heard himself say, even though every parental instinct was screaming at him to refuse. To protect his son from this disaster. Okay, but Michael, if this goes wrong, it won't. Michael said with absolute confidence. Trust me. But what none of them knew was that Michael Jackson was also terrified. Because his theory, his crazy, evolutionary theory about rhythm and stuttering was just that. A theory, untested, unproven, and he was about to stake Marcus Thompson's emotional well-being and his own reputation on it in front of 20,000 people and live television cameras. This was either going to be the most triumphant moment of Michael's career, or the biggest mistake he'd ever made. And in less than 2 hours, the whole world would know which. 2 hours later, the Bad World Tour concert was in full swing. Michael had already performed Wanna Be Startin' Something, Things I Do For You, and Off the Wall. The crowd was electric, screaming and dancing and singing along to every word. 20,000 people lost in the magic that was a Michael Jackson concert. But backstage, Marcus Thompson was experiencing the opposite of magic. He was experiencing pure terror. Michael's team had fitted him with a wireless microphone, had explained where he would stand on stage, had walked him through the technical details. But none of that made it less terrifying. Nothing could make it less terrifying to know that in approximately 4 minutes, he was going to walk onto a stage in front of 20,000 people who were expecting perfection from Michael Jackson and would instead get a stuttering 10-year-old kid. Can't do this, Marcus whispered to his mother, who was holding his hand so tight her knuckles were bone white. I can't go out there. You can, Sarah said, though her own voice was shaking with barely controlled fear. Michael believes in you. I believe in you. You can do this, baby. But Marcus was shaking his head, tears forming, breath coming in panicked gasps. What if I can't talk? What if everyone laughs? David Thompson, standing nearby, felt something break inside his chest. Because he'd been asking himself the same questions. What if this was a mistake? What if Michael's theory was wrong? What if they were about to watch their son be destroyed in front of the world? On stage, Michael was addressing the crowd between songs. Ladies and gentlemen, before I continue tonight's performance, I want to share something special with you. I want to introduce you to someone who taught me something important today. Someone who reminded me why I love music so much. Marcus, listening through the backstage monitors, felt his legs go weak. This was it. This was happening. There was no escape now. His name is Marcus Thompson. He's 10 years old. He's from Ohio. And Marcus has been dealing with something very difficult for the past 4 years. He stutters severely. It takes him a very long time to say things that other people can say easily. Marcus heard some murmurs from the crowd. Could imagine people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. This was exactly what he'd feared. Michael was parading his disability in front of everyone. But then Michael continued, and his voice was filled with something that sounded like excitement. But today, when I met Marcus backstage, I discovered something remarkable about him. Something that even he doesn't fully realize about himself yet. And tonight, I want to share that discovery with all of you. Marcus, come on out here, buddy. The stage manager gently pushed Marcus forward. Suddenly, he was walking, his legs somehow moving even though his brain was screaming at him to run the other direction. Walking through darkness toward blinding light. Walking toward the sound of 20,000 people who had gone quiet with anticipation. And then he was there, on the Madison Square Garden stage. Under lights so bright, they turned the audience into a sea of darkness. With pinprick lights, so loud, with his own heartbeat, he couldn't hear anything else. So terrified his hands were shaking like he had some kind of palsy. Michael put his arm around Marcus's shoulders. The gesture was protective, reassuring, and also possessive, like Michael was claiming responsibility for whatever was about to happen. "Marcus," Michael said gently into his microphone, his voice now reaching every corner of Madison Square Garden and everyone watching on television. "Can you tell all these nice people your name?" This was the test, the moment of truth, the point of no return. Marcus opened his mouth, and what came out was worse, so much worse than anything that had happened backstage. The microphone amplified every stutter, every struggle, every painful repetition. 20,000 people could hear him fighting for breath, fighting for words, fighting to force sounds past whatever barrier lived in his brain. He couldn't do it, couldn't get the words out. 30 seconds passed, 45 seconds, a full minute of Marcus struggling on stage while 20,000 people watched in uncomfortable silence. Tears were streaming down his face now. He could feel the crowd's discomfort, could sense their pity, could imagine what they were thinking. Why is Michael Jackson torturing this poor kid? In the VIP section, David Thompson had his eyes closed. He couldn't watch this, couldn't bear to see his son suffering like this. This was his worst nightmare come true. Sarah was crying silently, her hand over her mouth. This was the moment when it could all fall apart, when Marcus could run off stage, traumatized forever, when Michael's theory could be proven catastrophically wrong. But then Michael Jackson did something that changed everything. He knelt down to Marcus's level, his back to the 20,000 people, creating a bubble of privacy in the middle of the most public moment of Marcus's life. And he whispered, just loud enough for Marcus to hear, but not loud enough for the microphone to catch. "Marcus, listen to me. You're not broken. Your brain just works differently, and I'm about to prove it to you. Do you trust me?" Marcus, through his tears, nodded. "Okay, I want you to stop trying to talk. Instead, I want you to sing. Just sing your name like it's a song. Can you try that for me?" Marcus looked at Michael like he was crazy. Sing? How would that help? But Michael's eyes were so certain, so confident, so full of belief. Marcus took a shaky breath, and he sang, "My name is Marcus." The words came out perfectly, clearly, beautifully. No stutter, no struggle, no hesitation, just pure, clean singing. The crowd gasped, an audible sound of shock from 20,000 throats simultaneously, because they just heard this boy struggle for over a minute to speak. And now, he was singing like there was nothing wrong at all. Michael's face broke into the biggest smile, proud, amazed, delighted, triumphant. He spun to face the audience, his arm still around Marcus. "Do you hear that, everyone? Do you hear how beautiful his voice is when he sings? Marcus, sing it again, louder this time. My name is Marcus Thompson." Marcus sang, his voice getting stronger, more confident, filling the arena. 20,000 people erupted in applause. But Michael Jackson wasn't done. Not even close. Because he'd just proven the first part of his theory, now came the second part, the revolutionary part. "Marcus," Michael said, and now his voice had that edge of creative excitement that his band members recognize. "I want you to try something else now. I'm going to give you a rhythm, a beat. And I want you to speak, not sing, but speak with that rhythm, like you're rapping. Can you try that?" Michael didn't wait for an answer. He started beatboxing, creating a simple, steady rhythm with his mouth. Boom ts's, boom ts's, boom ts's. A beat that any hip-hop fan would recognize. A beat that created a pattern, a structure, a framework for words to follow. Then he nodded at Marcus. "Now speak, with the rhythm. Don't think about the words. Just feel the beat, and let the words ride it." Marcus, his heart still pounding, but now trusting Michael completely, spoke in rhythm with the beat. "My name is Marcus Thompson." No stutter. The words came out clearly because the rhythm was guiding them, giving his brain a pattern to follow, taking away the pressure and the fear and replacing it with structure. "I'm 10 years old," Marcus continued, gaining confidence with every syllable. "I live in Ohio." The crowd went absolutely wild. This wasn't polite applause anymore. This was people losing their minds. Standing, screaming, some crying, because they were witnessing something that seemed impossible. A boy who couldn't speak was now speaking clearly in front of 20,000 people. David Thompson, standing in the VIP section, had his hand over his mouth, openly sobbing. His son who he'd been ashamed of for years, had just spoken clearly in front of 20,000 people. Sarah was crying so hard she couldn't see, clutching David's arm, watching their miracle unfold on stage. But what nobody realized, yet not the crowd, not Marcus's parents, not even Marcus himself, was that this was just the beginning. Because Michael Jackson had discovered something that would change speech therapy forever. And he was about to take it even further. Michael pulled Marcus into a hug, and Marcus could feel that Michael was crying too. "You did it," Michael whispered in his ear, his voice thick with emotion. "You beautiful, brilliant boy. You just proved what I believed about you. But we're not done yet. Are you ready to go even bigger?" Marcus nodded against Michael's shoulder, still in shock that he'd just spoken without stuttering. Michael turned back to the microphone, his arm still around Marcus. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you just witnessed was proof of something I figured out today. Marcus doesn't have a speech problem. He has a rhythm problem. When his brain has patterns to follow musical patterns, rhythmic patterns, it can bypass whatever is causing the stutter. And now, going to teach Marcus something right here, right now, in front of all of you." The arena fell silent again, waiting, watching. "Marcus, I'm going to teach you a rap. A simple rap about introducing yourself. And then we're going to perform it together. You and me are here on this stage. Is that okay with you?" Marcus nodded, his eyes wide but no longer terrified. Now, they were filled with something else. Excitement, possibility, hope. For the next 10 minutes that seemed to stretch into eternity, and also flash by in seconds, 2000 people watched Michael Jackson teach Marcus Thompson a simple rap. The crowd didn't move, didn't talk, just watched, mesmerized, as the king of pop patiently worked with a stuttering boy, building his confidence, teaching him rhythm, showing him that his voice mattered. "Okay," Michael finally said. "Are you ready to perform this for everyone?" Marcus took a deep breath, nodded. Michael started the beat, and Marcus began to rap. "My name is Marcus. I'm 10 years old. I came to New York to see this show. Got a stutter. But that's okay, 'cause Michael Jackson taught me a brand new way to speak with rhythm, to find my beat, to turn my words into something sweet. I'm not broken, I'm not wrong. I just needed to find my song." When Marcus finished, when he delivered the final line with perfect rhythm and perfect confidence, Madison Square Garden erupted in the loudest applause of the entire night. Louder than when Michael moonwalked. Louder than when he hit the high note in Man in the Mirror. Louder than anything. Because this wasn't just entertainment. This was witnessing healing, transformation. A 10-year-old boy discovering that he wasn't broken, that his brain wasn't defective, that he just needed a different approach. Michael lifted Marcus's hand in victory, like a boxing champion. "Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus Thompson, the bravest, most amazing person in Madison Square Garden tonight." And then something happened that nobody expected. The crowd started chanting, "Marcus, Marcus, Marcus." 20,000 people chanting the name of a stuttering boy who had just found his voice. Marcus stood there, tears streaming down his face, hand held high by Michael Jackson, listening to thousands of people celebrate him, not pity him, not feel sorry for him, celebrate him. For the first time and for years, Marcus Thompson felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't broken after all. Backstage after the show, in Michael's dressing room, David Thompson did something he hadn't done since Marcus was 6 years old, before the accident, before the stutter, before the shame. He got down on his knees in front of his son and looked him directly in the eyes. "Marcus," David said, his voice breaking, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me. Are you listening?" Marcus nodded, still high from his stage experience, still buzzing with adrenaline and joy. "I owe you the biggest apology that any father has ever owed a son. For 4 years, I've been ashamed of you. Not because you did anything wrong, because I was weak. I was so focused on what you couldn't do that I forgot to see what you could do. I was embarrassed when I should have been proud. I looked away when I should have been looking at you. And I am so sorry." Marcus threw his arms around his father's neck. "I forgive you, Dad." The stutter was still there, David noticed, but somehow, it didn't matter anymore. Because he'd seen Marcus speak clearly. He'd seen proof that his son wasn't broken, just different. And different could be beautiful. Michael Jackson watched this moment from across the room, giving them privacy while still being present. And when David looked up at him with eyes full of tears and gratitude, Michael just smiled and nodded. Because this moment of healing between father and son was worth more than any applause or any Grammy award. "David, Sarah," Michael said after a few minutes, "can I talk to you about Marcus's future?" They nodded, still processing everything that had happened. "What I discovered tonight with Marcus, the rhythm technique, the musical approach to stuttering, this could help thousands of kids, maybe hundreds of thousands. But I need your permission to work with Marcus to develop this further. I want to create exercises he can practice, techniques he can use every day, a whole methodology based on what we discovered tonight. Would you be open to that? You want to keep working with him?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with disbelief and desperate hope. "I don't just want to work with him. I want to revolutionize how we think about stuttering. Because if rhythm helped Marcus, it could help so many others. But I need Marcus's commitment to practice. This won't be easy. It will take work. But I absolutely believe that we can change his life. Are you in, Marcus?" Marcus nodded so enthusiastically his whole body shook. "Why, yes. I'll practice every single day." And he did. For the next 3 months, Marcus Thompson worked with Michael Jackson, sometimes in person at Neverland Ranch when his family could make the trip, sometimes over phone calls when they couldn't, to develop what would eventually be called the rhythm speech method. Michael taught Marcus to use beatboxing as a tool for everyday speaking, to create internal rhythm patterns that would guide his words even when he wasn't performing or singing, to think of speaking not as a test he had to pass, but as another form of music. The results were remarkable. Within a month, Marcus could speak in simple sentences with minimal stuttering as long as he maintained internal rhythm. Within 2 months, he could have entire conversations using the techniques Michael taught him. Within 3 months, his stutter had reduced by nearly 90% in his daily life. But the real test came when Marcus returned to Riverside Elementary School after his 3-month absence. The first day back, Marcus stood up in front of his entire 5th grade class. Jake Anderson sat in the back row, smirking, ready to resume the bullying that had defined Marcus's school experience. Ready to call him broken record and watch him struggle. Mrs. Henderson, who had watched the Madison Square Garden footage on TV like everyone else in America, asked Marcus if he wanted to share his experience with the class. Marcus walked to the front of the room, looked directly at Jake Anderson, and spoke. "My name is Marcus Thompson. 3 months ago, I met Michael Jackson. He taught me that my stutter doesn't mean I'm broken. It just means my brain works differently. He taught me to find my rhythm. And now, want to share that with all of you." He spoke for 5 minutes. About meeting Michael, about the terror of going on stage, about discovering that rhythm could unlock his voice. And he only stuttered 3 times in the entire presentation. When he finished, the class erupted in applause. Even Jake Anderson, the bully who had tormented Marcus for years, sat in stunned silence, unable to process what he'd just witnessed. After class, Jake approached Marcus in the hallway. Marcus braced himself for mockery, for cruelty, for the same old dynamic. But Jake said something unexpected. "That was really cool, Marcus. What you did on stage with Michael Jackson. I'm sorry for calling you broken record. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't erase years of bullying, but it was something. A crack in the wall. A possibility of change." Marcus, using the confidence he'd found on the Madison Square Garden stage, looked Jake in the eye and said, "Thank you. I accept your apology." And then he walked away, head high, rhythm in his step, voice in his heart. Today, Marcus Thompson is 47 years old. He's a licensed speech-language pathologist who specializes in rhythm-based therapy for stuttering. He's the founder and director of the Rhythm Speech Center in Columbus, Ohio, a clinic that has helped over 10,000 people with stuttering disorders. His therapy method, directly based on what Michael Jackson taught him that September night in 1987, has been adopted by speech therapy programs in 47 countries. He's published research papers that have revolutionized the field. He's given TED Talks that have been viewed millions of times. He's written a book called Finding Your Rhythm, a new approach to stuttering that's required reading in speech pathology graduate programs. But what Marcus is most proud of isn't the success or the recognition or the research papers. It's the kids. The thousands of kids who come to his clinic afraid and ashamed and convinced they're broken, who leave knowing they're just different, who learn that their voices matter, that they have things worth saying, that stuttering doesn't define them. In every therapy session, Marcus tells his clients about September 22 and 1987, about standing on the Madison Square Garden stage, unable to speak, convinced he was about to be humiliated in front of the world. About Michael Jackson kneeling beside him and whispering, "You're not broken. You just need to find your rhythm." Michael Jackson didn't cure my stutter, Marcus always says in his sessions. He did something better. He showed me that my stutter wasn't a defect that needed to be fixed. It was just my brain working differently. And once I understood that, once I found tools that worked with how my brain functions instead of fighting against it, everything changed. Marcus still stutters occasionally, especially when he's tired or stressed or emotional. But it doesn't define him anymore, doesn't limit him, doesn't make him feel ashamed. And whenever he feels that old, familiar frustration rising, whenever he catches himself struggling with a word, he does what Michael taught him. He finds the rhythm, he finds the beat. He remembers that speaking isn't about perfection, it's about expression, about connection, about having the courage to use your voice, even when it's hard. In Marcus's office, there's a framed photograph from that night at Madison Square Garden. Michael Jackson kneeling beside 10-year-old Marcus on stage, both of them smiling, 20,000 people standing and applauding in the background. The photo is slightly blurry, taken by someone in the crowd on a 1987 camera, but the emotion is crystal clear. Beneath the photograph is a quote from Michael that Marcus had professionally inscribed. "You're not broken. You just needed to find your rhythm. And now that you have it, nobody can take it away from you." David Thompson, now 70 years old, visits his son's clinic every week. He volunteers, helping families navigate the early stages of rhythm therapy, sharing his own story of shame and transformation, telling parents what he learned the hard way, that their job isn't to fix their children. It's to help their children discover they don't need fixing. I wasted 4 years being ashamed of the most courageous person I've ever known, David tells these parents, many of whom he sees his old self in. Don't make my mistake. Your child isn't broken. They're just different. And with the right support, with the right tools, with the right belief in them, different can be extraordinary. The video footage from that Madison Square Garden concert has been viewed over 50 million times on YouTube. It's shown in speech therapy schools, in medical schools, in psychology classes, in teacher training programs, because it captured something rare and beautiful. The exact moment when someone discovered they weren't broken. But for Marcus, the most important legacy of that night isn't the fame or the research or the clinic or the thousands of people he's helped. It's simpler and more profound than that. It's the moment when he realized he had a voice, that his words mattered, that he deserved to be heard. It's the moment when his father looked at him with pride instead of shame. It's the moment when Michael Jackson, the king of pop, the most famous entertainer in the world, knelt beside him in front of 20,000 people and whispered, "You're going to change the world, Marcus. Not despite your stutter. Because of it." And Michael was right. Marcus Thompson has changed the world, one rhythm at a time, one stuttering child at a time, one transformed family at a time, all because Michael Jackson believed something that nobody else had considered, that sometimes the cure for not being able to find your words is finding your beat. That September night at Madison Square Garden, 20,000 people came to see Michael Jackson perform his greatest hits, but they got something better. They got to witness a miracle. Not the miracle of a stutter disappearing completely. The miracle of a child discovering that he was never broken in the first place. Sometimes healing doesn't happen in doctors' offices or therapy sessions or quiet, private moments. Sometimes healing happens on stage, in front of thousands of witnesses, in the spotlight, under pressure, in the most public, most terrifying moment imaginable. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step into that spotlight. Trust someone who believes in you, and let yourself be transformed in front of the world. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the most powerful performances aren't the ones that are perfectly executed. They're the ones where someone finds their voice for the very first time. Marcus Thompson found his voice on September 20th, 1987, at Madison Square Garden, and he's been using it to help others find theirs ever since. All because Michael Jackson understood something simple but revolutionary. We're not broken. We just need to find our rhythm, and once we find it, nothing can stop us.